Welcome back. You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London. I'm Daniel Sinner with today's discussion. On Monday, 3 men were found guilty of a gang-related shooting in South London that left a 5-year-old girl permanently paralysed. Thusha Kamalekswaran was shot as she played in her aunt's shop in March last year. The 3 men, Nathaniel Grant, Kazim Kowale and Anthony McCalla, were looking for a rival gang member when Grant shot through the window. They're members of the Gas Gang, a name which stands variously for guns and shanks, grind and stack, and grip and shoot. Over the last 2 years, Gas Gang members are thought to have killed 3 people, and police have blamed them for being behind up to 80% of crimes resulting in death or serious injury in the South London suburb of Brixton. Joining me to discuss gang crime is Ali Crossley, a senior researcher at the Centre for Social Justice and authored a recent report on the youth justice system. Peter Smythe is chairman of the Metropolitan Police Federation. Dr Robin Benians, a child and adolescent psychiatrist. And John McGee, a reformed gang member and now motivational speaker. Peter Smythe from the Metropolitan Police Federation. How severe is the gang problem at the moment in London?
It is very severe. It has been for a number of years. I myself worked on a thing called Operation Trident, which was set up to deal with particularly gun crime. That has been very successful in increasing the number of people being successfully prosecuted, but unfortunately has never had the anticipated effect of a reduction in overall gun crime and gang crime, and that continues to grow.
Ali Crossley from the Centre for Social Justice, how severe is the gang crime problem from your perspective?
Well, I think it varies across areas. So gangs are certainly a threat, but I think the question of, say, whether they're a growing threat depends on whether authorities are doing what is needed to address those. So some of our sources are actually disputing the fact that the gang problem is getting worse, and this is particularly so where they're taking effective action to tackle gangs, so using enforcement as well as prevention to tackle the underlying causes and positive prevention to support gang exit. But we know that in some areas gangs are snowballing and the situation is becoming more serious, so more people are being sucked into gangs at a younger age. More violence, more guns, and sexual exploitation of gangs has been described to us as one of the hidden horrors of the 21st century.
John McGee, how serious would you say the gang crime problem is at the moment?
Yeah, well, speaking up in the northwest, I think it's the same like any part of the country. There's various pockets of various gangs, but it's just a trouble everywhere, really, isn't it? No matter where you go.
I want to go into Dr Robin Benians. You're a child and adolescent psychiatrist. Why do people turn to gangs?
We need to be looking at the study of ethology, of animal behaviour, and that includes the behaviour of humankind. There is a famous Russian ethologist called Ibel Ibisfeld that your listeners might refer themselves to. We would then understand a little bit more about adolescence and how there are 2 tasks for an adolescent. One is to find his identity, what he wants to do, what he believes in, and the other is to find his independence. And those who are dependent resent dependency. And it's not surprising that in these days of appalling recession, that young people are saying, well, we can't trust the grown-ups. Let's have our own ways, and this is what they're doing. And of course, adolescents tend to be totally inconsiderate of other people. If a little 5-year-old gets in the way of my bullet, that's her fault, not mine, which is terrible. I would just like to say one other thing, and that is before the Iron Curtain fell down, I happened to be in Prague when it happened in 1989, the Russians dealt with delinquents, especially young ones, as if they were mentally sick. Whereas, thanks to various people setting up juvenile justice here in England, we've tended to glorify them. What I would ask is whether this influences the way gangs operate and exist and set themselves up in Russia, say from London or from the northeast.
Peter Smythe, you've worked on Operation Trident, the Met Police's task force that was set up in January on this. Does what Dr. Benians is saying sound familiar about why the Met Police think people are turning to gangs?
Well, unfortunately, we tend to deal with the effects rather than the causes, which may be one of the problems. But our experience is that people go into gangs, perhaps not with their eyes wide open to begin with, but gradually get sucked in. And once in there, either have great difficulty getting out or adopt the lifestyle completely. They don't seem to appreciate what it does to their life expectancy, because clearly there is an effect there. And unfortunately, once in that lifestyle, they just seem to allow it to mushroom and take over their life.
John McGee, you're a former gang member. Why do you think people are turning to gangs?
Well, there's a wide range of issues, really. Speaking personally from my own personal experience, started from a very young age, when mum and dad broke up and there was no masculine in the relationship. And as a young man growing up, rightly like your psychologist said before, you tend to look for that male role model. Some of these young people are looking up to role models in the community, and it's a sense of belonging. Looking back on my own life, it's just most people want to be loved and they want nurture. And when you become part of a gang, it's like a family. And you have your loyalties to that family, and you don't tend to see the risks that are involved, because like growing up on most council estates or most ghettos, you go about your business and the risks you take don't really seem like risks. It's only until you may become across somebody like I did, a youth worker who you sort of trust and starts to shows you things from the other side of the fence and helps you understand and educates you about some of the risks you are taking.
What would it have taken to stop you from joining a gang?
I don't know. I think it would have been inevitable, because I think it's down to your environment, you see. A bit of the old monkey see, monkey do. You adapt to your environment and it becomes survival of the fittest. So, lack of education and support within the community. And you're still going to go about your business the way you do your business, and you're going to hang around with your boys that you hang around with. And it's something that we use in our programme, something called monkey see, monkey do, where we tend to copy the negative behaviour but not think of the negative consequences that comes with the actions. So what we try and do is offer a paradigm shift where we start focusing on copying positive behaviour and looking at the consequences of that, which in return helps with their aspirations and the self-belief, really.
Ali Crossley, you're from the Centre for the Research of Social Justice. You did a report into the youth justice system. Do you think a deterrent might be a stronger justice system, or do you think that maybe, as John was saying, we need to maybe start at families and communities first?
I have to say I completely agree with what John has been saying. I think we really need to start in families and communities and in the early years, because we know that there are certain risk factors that you can see even before children have been born, and it's really important that we provide that support to prevent family breakdown, to prevent fathers leaving, to tackle mental and emotional health problems, to prevent children from being excluded from school, and make sure that they can succeed in education and both in employment as well. Because, as John said, these young people turn to gangs as an alternative family and also as an alternative source of support, of employment, really. So we feel that much more needs to be done to be tackling the underlying causes, and enforcement definitely has a key role to play, but it has to be used alongside the prevention and also the positive interventions to actually support exiting from gang life.
You say looking at families, looking at communities. From what Peter was saying before, the police aren't really looking at that. Operation Trident is dealing with the problem, not what causes it.
Yeah, I mean, I think our sources are saying that they really welcome what the Met is doing and definitely have seen increased focus on enforcement and really ramping up that effort, and really welcome that, but feel that there does need to be more work on tackling the underlying causes. So some of the approaches that we're seeing at the moment, like the Troubled Families Agenda, where they've announced that they're going to do intensive work with 120,000 troubled families to turn around those families. We really welcome those kinds of initiatives. There have been a number of reports that have come out on educational exclusion recently, trying to tackle that problem. So the more that we can see of this, the better, because I think we feel that there's a better understanding about tackling the underlying causes, but I think it's going to be a long time before we see that actually filtering down to practice and being embedded and being delivered. But we are looking forward to when it is coming down to the ground.
A reminder that you're listening to The Voice of Russia in London. I'm Daniel Sinner with today's discussion on gang crime. Joining me is Ali Crossley from the Centre for Social Justice, Peter Smythe, Chairman of the Metropolitan Police Federation, psychiatrist Dr Robin Benians, and John McGee, a reformed gang member. Peter Smythe from the Met Police Federation. Ali is saying we need to look more at communities. John is saying we need to look more at communities and families. Why aren't the police doing this at the moment? Why are they only dealing with the problem that's causing?
Well, I think the police's job mainly is one of enforcement, and we are not the cure-all social workers for everybody. There has been a substantial increase in community engagement. One of the problems there is that in these communities, when you go in there and try and find people to talk to, you end up with, quite frankly, people in their 30s and 40s who may have been gang members in the past but are not any longer. And I think the young people don't necessarily agree that these people speak for them. And it's very difficult to engage directly with the young people who are involved in the gangs and not people who are on the periphery or who think they speak for a community, and quite often they don't.
Why can we not turn to the younger members?
There's a deep mistrust of the police, and that's understandable. We do need to build bridges there. We need to improve our community engagement. That is not the only thing, though. It has to be a joint effort. It can't just be the police. It has to be a coordinated effort by the whole of society. These people feel empowered being part of a gang. Clearly, it does attract a lucrative remuneration element to it as well. And all those problems need to be tackled, but it needs to be tackled in a cohesive way.
John McGee, would you agree that there's a distrust of the police within gangs? And if so, how can gang members get over that? How can the police get over that?
I don't know. I can only speak on behalf of the police in the Lancashire Police Force, because there's been some fantastic work up here. You know, back in the day when I was a youngster, I wouldn't have thought twice of speaking to the police, because I was conditioned to believe that they was the enemy. But as you get older and you become wiser and you become educated yourself, obviously there's a huge paradigm shift there as well towards the police. And I can certainly say on the estate that we grew up on, which was Highcroft, Roman Road, which was still is notoriously known for being, you know, the most socially deprived area. In Blackburn we don't, although there has been massive investments into the area. I can certainly say when I have the pleasure of going up to the community centre, there's been a big change towards the police up there. Don't get me wrong, there's still a small pocket of certain individuals that are going through the process that want to be renowned for being the local bad boys or the local bad boy gang. But overall, as a community, there's been some amazing improvement within the community up here.
I would like to take up, when you talked about family, gang, as it were, substituting for family. I was recently asked to assess the mental state of a 17-year-old who was before the court for raping a woman. And when he was interviewed by the police, he said, "Oh, my mate said, if you do something really bad, you will become fam, F-A-M." And this was his word, obviously, for how you get to be an insider in the gang. And what did he do when he raped this woman? Did it rather stupidly. He even managed to get his mobile phone into her handbag. And, well, to tell a long story. Another thing I would like to say is that I recently worked in Gibraltar. Now, everybody in Gibraltar has a job. They are paid. All healthy people want to contribute to society. In a way, because there is such depression everywhere, such lack of employment, it's not surprising we have this substitute culture of gangs. Incidentally, I think we've always had gangs. I don't think they're that new. It's just that they're worse at the moment, and it's all been stoked up by the public greed. And I think last summer in Tottenham and Brixton, no, I don't think it was Brixton, it was Croydon, wasn't it? They said, it's our turn, we're going to go out and get something. Interestingly, the young people in their gangs may have started this, but on the next night, a whole lot of adults had arrived, not necessarily from London, to join in the looting.
Is it just a family issue for you? Is that what you think, that from the psychological perspective, that people just need the sense of belonging that they just haven't got when they grow up?
Well, John made this point, didn't he? He said his parents separated, there was no male role model, but he jolly soon found one in the gang. And this is what the person I was saying who did this rape, he was looking for acknowledgement from his colleagues in the gang. He won't have got it because he's since developed a mental illness and he'll be away in a mental home for some years to come.
Ali, it seems to me that if we start dealing with the communities and start dealing with the families, that might take a long time to seep through and prevent the gang culture. We might be able to stop people that are growing up now. If we look at the way that we can tackle gang crime at the moment, if we look at what they're doing in Glasgow, their police service is using a model that's used in Boston to break up gangs and stop people from joining them. They're giving an ultimatum. They're saying, either you give up your gangs and we will help you get jobs, we'll help you find somewhere to live, or we'll come after you for everything.
Yeah, I mean, those models, we profiled them in our report on street gangs, Dying to Belong, so we absolutely commend both of those models. And I know that about London, that we're starting to see some of those models rolling out, and that's what I was talking about earlier, where you have the focus on enforcement and all of the agencies working together. As Peter says, this is not just about the police, this is not something we can arrest our way out of. It involves working with teachers, with A&E departments to identify young people who've been stabbed or shot, working with youth workers, working with Job Centre Plus to actually ensure that there are opportunities out there for these young people and that they are getting them and they're being supported to stay in employment as well. So we absolutely support models such as those you've cited up in Glasgow and in Boston, and we think that is absolutely the way forward of a multi-pronged and multi-agency approach.
So that is the only model we should be replicating. Is it that simple?
No, it's not that. I'm not saying it's simple at all, and that's not necessarily the only model, but from looking around both the UK and also abroad, those are the models that have seemed to work best, where there is that focus on, as you say, tackling the underlying causes. That's going to take a long time. That is a long-term recommendation, but if we start doing that work now, we will see the benefits. And as you said, it's giving gang members the ultimatum of either we will give you every support we can, and we can get together to support you out of this gang, or we will bring down everything we have on you. And we're just citing what we've seen to work. And I know that some of those initiatives using that multi-pronged approach are being rolled out in some boroughs in London, and they're actually the boroughs that are saying to us, you know, we don't see the gang problem getting worse because we're actually doing something about it. But I think it has to be an approach that is pan-London, because we're also hearing that when some boroughs are getting better at enforcement and actually tackling gangs, that they are perpetrating offences in other boroughs and even outside of London as well. So it really needs to be everyone working together on this.
John, you said that you turned to a social worker, you gained, or they gained your trust. Do you think that this model which Glasgow is using at the moment, and which Ali is saying we need to pan across the whole of the country, the whole of London, is going to be an effective way of dealing with gang crime?
I strongly support that. What's the lady's name? Is it Ali?
Yes.
Yeah, I strongly support what she says there, because it really does our strength, how we're working up here. We've just formed, from Mr. Consequence, we've also formed another business called Streets UK, where we're using sports as the vehicle as well, helping the young people choose a sport of their choice. And when we engage them with that sport, then we use the mentoring sessions round, and every session's around the consequences of your actions. And how we found strength in that is, it sounds very similar to this model in Glasgow. Our strength is definitely our working partnerships, you know, with the police, the community safety team. We work very closely with Blackburn Rovers Football Club, with the Trust. And we use our exit routes as Blackburn College, Training 2000, which is apprenticeships, and Darwinham Academy, which is part of the Aldridge Foundation Trust, which is looking at entrepreneurship and setting up your own business. Because, you know, some of these young individuals are like myself. They've left school at 14, 15. They're not educated. They can't buy into the system because they've not been given the life skills earlier on in life, because there's no positive male role model there to show them the way. So later on in life, this catches them up at school, and put two fingers up to the system. But a lot of these young people have got good qualities, like, for example, if they're involved in drug dealing stuff like I was, from a very early age, I knew what my profit margin was, who my market was, and how to take it to market. And that's no difference from if you're selling a DVD player to selling, I don't know, teddies on the internet. Teaching these young people these skills which they already have without having to take the risks and then end up in jail or maybe dead. So to me, the strength is definitely in the working partnerships and everybody collectively coming together for a universal purpose for these young people to get them on the right path.
Do you think it is the police that should be implementing this? If Peter is right that there is a distrust of the police, is it time for us to shift it to maybe social workers to implement it, or does it need to be the police that give them this ultimatum?
No, I totally disagree with that, because I can't speak on behalf of the London Met. I can only speak on behalf of what's going up in Lancashire. But I think collectively, sometimes we get sucked into the media, and the media like to have the little pop at certain organisations. I think what we need to start doing is putting our torchbeam on all the positive work that all the working partnerships are doing together, and stop trying to focus on the negative stuff. There's enough negative stuff in the press. We're talking about human beings' lives here. Collectively, we all seek the same goal. We all want to help each other within the community and help, as many human beings as possible, do something positive with their lives. So I don't buy into that negative stuff. And I'd rather people focus on the positive stuff, all the positive work that everybody's doing collectively. That's my personal view.
A reminder that you're listening to The Voice of Russia in London. I'm Daniel Sinner with today's discussion on gang crime. Joining me is Ali Crossley from the Centre for Social Justice, Peter Smythe, Chairman of the Metropolitan Police Federation, psychiatrist Dr. Robin Benians, and John McGee, a reformed gang member. Peter Smythe, Strathclyde Police in Glasgow, they've implemented this system. Is it one that the Metropolitan Police will be thinking of implementing, or is it time for the government to put this pressure or put it onto social workers to implement?
No, I'm sure the Met will be, and I don't think it's simply a matter for social workers either. As I said, I think it has to be a cohesive approach across a whole range of peoples and bodies. But if you take, for example, on a housing estate, if there's an alternative to the gang, whether it be basketball club or a football club or whatever, then you will take some people away from the gang. You won't get them all, but the more that you can do to engage these people and give them another thing to focus on, the more you will get them out of gangs and reduce the power of the gangs. And that's where some effort has to be concentrated, and that's going to take money, and the government have to play money into that. But the long-term effects of not doing that are too disastrous to contemplate.
You're a representative of the police force here. How do they feel? Are they getting enough support to help tackle gang crime?
Well, the police will always say we never get enough support, but it is difficult both in terms of government and in terms of communities. Trident has been very successful in engaging communities and building up trust with communities. We now do get people who will come forward and make statements, but that again is the prosecution side of it, and again that's not tackling any root causes. And the police, we have a job to do, and our job normally is enforcement. There is an element of crime prevention, but it has to be much wider than that. And I think these people have to be given opportunities both educationally and socially to do other things rather than join the gang.
The enforcement side is quite interesting, because the police will obviously work their hardest to make sure they do enforce and that they crack down on these criminals and these gangs. But is it frustrating for them that they might do that, but the person that gets a sentence is quite lenient?
It can be. Clearly, we would say that anybody who's carrying a gun with the intention of harming people should go to prison for a very long time. In the main, they do. There are exceptions. You have to give judges some leeway. They hear the facts of the case. They hear the mitigation. I don't accept that particularly young girls who are carrying guns on behalf of males in the gang should be given lenient sentences. I think if you're carrying that gun, although you're not intending to fire it, you are part of that process. But in the main, we accept the court's decisions. We will bring people to justice and hope that they get a reasonable sentence that fits the crime.
Do you think the sentences at the moment are harsh enough?
Yeah, I'm pretty much. I think people who kill for gain, for monetary gain, I personally think should go to prison for the rest of their life and should never come out. People who kill in anger, that's slightly different. But people who are carrying guns to effect their business purposes, their drugs dealing and whatever, I think they need to know that they are at risk of very, very long custodial sentences.
Ali, this plays straight into your expertise, the report you did on the youth justice system. Do you think it is a big enough deterrent? Do you think that the sentences are matching the crimes?
Well, I think what we have to bear in mind is that for so many of these young people, even a very harsh custodial sentence is not a deterrent, because they are every day walking out of their doors and risk being shot or stabbed. So I think there's a quote in our gangs report that they're not scared because they're more scared of being shot, of being kind of, 6 feet under, as I think the guy that we spoke to said. And so I think, at risk of sounding like a broken record, we need to focus on enforcement and having appropriate sentences. But we actually, if people are carrying guns and knives, we need to actually think about why they're doing so, and thinking about the fear factor, because we know that when young people are carrying knives, that a lot of them do so because they're actually scared with gangs in their community. So again, it's about tackling this issue from multiple angles, and if we have those sentences, then we need to make sure that we are looking at the motivations for carrying knives and guns. And I think then on the sentencing issue, one comment that we made in our youth justice report is that actually very short sentences where young people will only go to prison for a couple of months, 3-4 months, is actually really unhelpful, because they are very, very destabilizing. They can't do anything productive in custody, and it destabilizes any good work that is going on with them in the community. So we really asked in our report that those are reconsidered, and actually what we need to see is really robust alternatives in the community, and more and better work going on in the community in terms of prevention, so that young people never get to that stage where they are at risk of going into custody.
What alternatives do you want to see?
We've talked about restorative justice, really intensive family interventions. Restorative justice, I think there's quite a lot of misconception that they're a soft option, but actually for young people actually being presented with the consequences of their actions and having to face up to that can be really, really powerful. And for the Youth Justice Report, we actually visited Northern Ireland, where pretty much all of the young people who are sentenced have to go to a restorative conference and face their victims, and their victims have an influence over what their sentence will look like. And we thought that was a really, really great model, and would like to see more of that coming over here, and much more one-to-one work with young people, because we know that young people turn to gangs because they see them as an alternative family. We know that young people get involved in offending more generally because of family breakdown, and if someone can be that single, stable source of support for that young person, then it can be really helpful in believing in themselves that they can change and actually changing.
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time. Thanks to all of my guests: Ali Crossley from the Centre for Social Justice, Peter Smythe, Chairman of the Metropolitan Police Federation, psychiatrist Dr. Robin Benians, and John McGee, a reformed gang member.
Surprising that in these days of appalling recession, that young people are saying, well, we can't trust the grown-ups. Let's have our own ways, and this is what they're doing. And of course adolescents tend to be totally inconsiderate of other people. If a little 5-year-old gets in the way of my bullet, that's her fault, not mine, which is terrible. I would just like to say one other thing, and that is before the Iron Curtain fell down, I happened to be in Prague when it happened in 1989, the Russians dealt with delinquents, especially young ones, as if they were mentally sick. Whereas, thanks to various people setting up juvenile justice here in England, we've tended to glorify them. What I would ask is whether this influences the way gangs operate and exist and set themselves up in Russia, say from London or from the north.
To have killed 3 people, and police have blamed them for being behind up to 80% of crimes resulting in death or serious injury in the South London suburb of Brixton. Joining me to discuss gang crime is Ali Crossley, a senior researcher at the Centre for Social Justice and authored a recent report on the youth justice system. Peter Smythe is chairman of the Metropolitan Police Federation. Dr. Robin Benians, a child and adolescent psychiatrist. And John McGee, a reformed gang member and now motivational speaker. Peter Smythe from the Metropolitan Police Federation. How severe is the gang problem at the moment in London?
It is very severe. It has been for a number of years. I myself worked on a thing called Operation Trident, which was set up to deal with particularly gun crime. That has been very successful in increasing the number of people being successfully prosecuted, but unfortunately has never had the anticipated effect of a reduction in overall gun crime and gang crime. And that can...
Like any part of the country, there's various pockets of various gangs, but it's just the trouble everywhere, really, isn't it? No matter where you go.
I want to go to Dr. Robin Benians. You're a child and adolescent psychiatrist. Why do people turn to gangs?
We need to be looking at the study of ethology, of animal behaviour, and that includes the behaviour of humankind. There is a famous Russian ethologist called Ibel Ibisfeld that your listeners might refer themselves to. We would then understand a little bit more about adolescence and how there are two tasks for an adolescent. One is to find his identity, what he wants to do, what he believes in, and the other is to find his independence. And those who are dependent resent dependency, and it's not...
continues to grow.
Ali Crossley from the Centre for Social Justice. How severe is the gang crime problem from your perspective?
Well, I think it varies across areas. So gangs are certainly a threat, but I think the question of, say, whether they're a growing threat depends on whether authorities are doing what is needed to address those. So some of our sources are actually disputing the fact that the gang problem is getting worse, and this is particularly so where they're taking effective action to tackle gangs, so using enforcement as well as prevention to tackle the underlying causes and positive intervention to support gang exit. But we know that in some areas gangs are snowballing and the situation is becoming more serious, so more people are being sucked into gangs at a younger age. More violence, more guns, and sexual exploitation of gangs has been described to us as one of the hidden horrors of the 21st century.
John McGee, how serious would you say the gang crime problem is at the moment?
Yeah, well, speaking up in the northwest, I think it's the same.
Welcome back. You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London. I'm Daniel Sinner with today's discussion. On Monday, 3 men were found guilty of a gang-related shooting in South London that left a 5-year-old girl permanently paralysed. Thusha Kamalik-Swarin was shot as she played in her aunt's shop in March last year. The 3 men, Nathaniel Grant, Kazim Kowale and Anthony McCalla, were looking for a rival gang member when Grant shot through the window. They're members of the Gas Gang, a name which stands variously for guns and shanks, grind and stack and grip and shoot. Over the last 2 years, Gas Gang members are thought